I was halfway through closing my laptop when Mason called me at 11:47. He didn't even say hey. He just went, "Logan, can you go get my mom?" I sat there for a second, phone pressed to my ear, like maybe I'd heard him wrong. What? She's at the Blue Lantern off Route 8. Or behind it. I don't know. She called me crying, then hung up. I'm 2 hours away and I can't leave till morning. That woke me up fast. Everybody in our town knew Jasmine in some way. If not directly, then through stories. Mason's mom was the kind of woman who could walk into a gas station in sweatpants and still make half the room look up. Pretty, loud when she wanted to be, impossible to predict. Every few months there was some new guy, some new truck in her driveway, some new mess people pretended not to notice. I'd known her since high school, back when I'd go over to Mason's place and she'd be in the kitchen with a cigarette near the back door, talking like I was older than I was. I said, "What happened?" "He was drinking. They fought." She said she hates him. Then she said she hated herself. Just please go get her before she does something stupid. 5 minutes later I was in my truck. The Blue Lantern was one of those places that always looked tired, even when it was busy. Neon sign buzzing, gravel lot, 2 pickups parked crooked, 1 flickering light by the side entrance. I drove around the building once before I saw her. She was sitting on the curb near the edge of the lot with her heels off, one hand braced behind her, the other holding her phone like she wanted to throw it. Her hair was a mess. Makeup smudged. One thin strap of her dress had slipped down her shoulder. Even from the truck I could tell she'd been crying, and I could also tell she'd hate that I could tell. I parked and got out slow. "Jasmine?" She looked up at me, and for a second her face went hard, like she was embarrassed it was me. Then she laughed once, dry and ugly. "Of course he sent you. Mason called me." "Yeah, because that's not humiliating at all." I bent and picked up one of her heels from the gravel. "Come on. Let's get you home." She didn't move. "I'm not going home. It's almost midnight." "I know what time it is, Logan." A car pulled out from the far side of the lot, headlights sliding over us. She looked away and wiped under one eye fast, like she didn't want strangers seeing it. Then she stood up too quickly, stumbled, and caught my arm. I steadied her. She smelled like perfume, smoke, and whatever had been spilled inside that bar. Her fingers stayed on my wrist a second longer than they needed to. "Did he hit you?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "No. He just said enough." That answer sat wrong with me, but she was already pulling away. I opened the passenger door for her. She looked at it, then at me. I said I'm not going home. "Then where?" "I don't care." That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She got in anyway, barefoot, gathering the loose strap of her dress with one hand. I walked around, got behind the wheel, and started the truck. For about 30 seconds neither of us spoke. I pulled out of the lot and turned toward town. "Don't," she said. I glanced over. "Don't what?" "Don't take me back there. You need sleep. I need to not walk into my house feeling like this." "So what, you want me to drive around for an hour?" She leaned her head back against the seat and stared at the dark windshield. "Maybe." I should have said no right there. I knew it even then. She was upset, I was tired, and she was my friend's mother. There were about 10 reasons to ignore whatever this was turning into. But then she laughed again, quieter this time, and said, "Please, Logan. Just not home yet. I can't do the quiet house thing tonight. I can't do the staring at the ceiling and replaying his face and hearing my own voice sound pathetic. Just drive." So I drove. At first it was only supposed to be the back roads for a little while. We passed closed bait shops, dark fields, one diner sign still glowing red in the distance. She rolled the window down halfway and let the cold air hit her face. After 10 minutes she started talking without looking at me. He told me I make everything hard. I kept my eyes on the road. People say that when they don't want to admit they're the problem too. She turned and looked at me then, really looked, like she was surprised I'd said something back instead of just nodding. You always do that? Do what? Sound older than you are. I shrugged. You always do this? Ruin my life on a Tuesday? Despite herself, she smiled. That changed the air in the truck. Not fixed. Not lighter exactly. Just different. Less like a rescue, more like the start of something I didn't have a name for yet. 20 minutes later I passed the highway exit that would have taken us back toward town. Jasmine saw it and said nothing. Neither did I. By the time I asked, "You hungry?" We were already headed out of the county, with no real plan, a half tank of gas, and her heels still tossed on my floorboard like we weren't coming back anytime soon. By the time the sky started turning gray, I realized neither of us had said a single thing about going back. That should have told me everything. We stopped at a gas station just off the highway, one of those places with bright lights, stale coffee, and a bored guy behind the counter watching a tiny TV mounted in the corner. Jasmine stayed in the truck while I filled up. When I got back, she was sitting sideways in the seat with her knees pulled up a little, my hoodie around her shoulders. I hadn't even seen her take it from the back. You stealing my stuff now? I said. She looked down at herself. You want it back? No. Then stop sounding offended. She looked rough still, but not in the same way as before. The crying had burned off. Her makeup was mostly gone, and with her hair tied up loose using a rubber band she found in the console, she looked younger and more tired at the same time. Not like Mason's wild mom everybody talked about. Just like a woman who hadn't slept and didn't want the night to catch up with her. Inside I got coffee and 2 sausage biscuits wrapped in paper. When I handed her one, she stared at it. You really think this is what I need right now? Food and caffeine fixes most bad decisions. She took the biscuit anyway. That's a terrible life philosophy. Still works. We ate in the parking lot with the heater running. She kept picking little pieces off the edge instead of taking real bites. After a while she said, Mason mad? At you? No. Worried, yeah. She gave a small nod like that landed where it needed to. Then she looked out the windshield and said, I hate that he's used to this. I didn't answer right away. She noticed. Say it, she said. I wasn't going to say anything. Which means you were. I took a drink of coffee. I was just thinking maybe you're used to it too. She let that sit there between us. For a second I thought she'd snap at me, maybe tell me to turn around and leave her at the next exit. Instead she gave this tired little laugh and said, that's probably the problem. After that we got back on the road. Once the sun came up, everything felt stranger in a calmer way. The world looked normal again. Truck stops. Fast food signs. Long stretches of road with nothing much to see. But inside the cab it still felt like we were outside real life. My phone had 3 missed calls from Mason and 1 text asking if she was okay. I answered with, she's with me. We're fine. That was true, I guess. Or true enough for the moment. Around 10 in the morning Jasmine leaned over and changed the radio station twice, then gave up and plugged her phone in. A few seconds later some old soft rock song started playing low through the speakers. You listen to this? I asked. Don't ruin it. I'm learning things about you I can't unlearn. She smiled without looking at me. Good. Maybe I'm tired of being predictable. That stuck with me because Jasmine had never seemed predictable. Not to me. She always felt like somebody walking a step ahead of her own mess, pretending she still had control of it. We crossed into the mountains just before noon. Nothing dramatic, just winding roads, tall trees, rock walls cut into the hills, little towns with diners and hardware stores and flags hanging from porches. Jasmine had fallen quiet by then. Not bad quiet. Just softer. Resting her head against the window, watching everything pass by like she was trying on a different life for a minute. At one overlook I pulled over mostly because I needed to stretch. She got out too, still in my hoodie, arms folded against the breeze. We stood by the rail looking out over the trees and the long road curving below us. "This is stupid," I said. "What part?" "All of it. And yet you're still here." I looked over at her. "So are you." She turned then, leaning back against the rail. Wind moved a few loose pieces of hair around her face. In daylight, with no bar lights, no crying, no angry calls, she looked almost calm. It threw me off more than if she'd stayed chaotic. "I didn't want you to see me like that," she said. "Then you shouldn't hang out behind bars on curbs." That got a real laugh out of her. She looked down, then back up at me. "I mean it. I hate being the woman people go get." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said what felt true. "You weren't hard to be around." Her expression changed a little at that. Nothing huge. Just this pause, like she was checking whether I meant it. Then she looked away toward the trees again and said, almost to herself, "You always were sweet." I should have let that pass. I didn't. "You say that like I'm still 19. She looked at me from the corner of her eye. "Are you telling me you're not?" There was something in the way she said it that made the air feel tighter. Not open, not obvious, just charged enough that I noticed it and then noticed myself noticing it. We left the overlook and found a roadside motel around mid-afternoon when both of us were running on fumes. Low brick building, faded sign, parking right outside the rooms. I went in to get us a room, telling myself it was practical, just a place to sleep for a few hours before we figured out the next move. But walking back with the key in my hand, seeing Jasmine sitting on the hood of my truck in my hoodie with the sun dropping behind her, I already knew the trip felt bigger to me than it should have. And the worst part was, I didn't want it to end. That should have been my sign to slow down. Instead, I followed her inside. The room smelled like old air conditioner, cheap soap, and whatever cleaner they used to make a place look more decent than it was. One bed, one chair by the window, a lamp that buzzed if you looked at it too long. Jasmine dropped her overnight bag by the door and kicked off her sandals, then just stood there for a second like she didn't know what version of herself she was supposed to be in that room. I tossed my keys on the table. "You should get some sleep." She looked at me and gave this tired smile. "You keep saying that like you're my dad. Trust me, I do not want that job." "Good," she said, still looking at me. "You'd be terrible at it." I laughed, but I also felt that little shift again. Same one from the overlook. The kind that made a normal sentence feel like it had something else under it. She went into the bathroom and shut the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the muted TV for a minute, not watching anything. My phone buzzed with another message from Mason asking how she was doing. I typed, "She's okay. Just tired." Didn't mention the motel. Didn't mention the mountains. Didn't mention that none of this felt normal anymore. When Jasmine came back out, she'd washed her face and pulled her hair down. She looked softer without the makeup, softer without the attitude she wore around people back home. She had on the same dress still, but with my hoodie over it, sleeves hanging past her hands. It should have looked thrown together. It didn't. She caught me looking and lifted an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing. That's never true." I leaned back on my hands. "You look different, that's all." "Worse?" "No. She stood there a second longer, like she wanted me to say more. I didn't. Mostly because I didn't trust myself to. A little later we ended up walking to the diner next door because neither of us could sleep. It was one of those places with sticky menus and a coffee pot that never seemed to run dry. We took a booth in the back. She ordered fries and coffee. I got a burger I barely touched. For a while we just sat there, tired enough to stop pretending. Then Jasmine started talking. Not the quick sharp version of talking she used when she wanted control. The real kind. She told me this wasn't even the first time she'd left that man and gone back. Told me she kept thinking every new start would somehow come out cleaner than the last one. Told me she was tired of being disappointed in herself before anybody else had the chance to do it first. I listened. That was it. I listened. Then she asked me things too. About work. About why I never stayed with any girl in town for long. About whether I ever wanted to leave and not come back. It didn't feel like one of those random late-night conversations where people talk just to fill silence. It felt closer than that. Like we were both handing over parts we normally kept tucked away. At one point she smiled and said, "You've always watched people more than they realize." I shrugged. Maybe. "No," she said. "I remember. Even back when you came over to see Mason. You'd sit there acting quiet, but nothing got past you. That got under my skin in a way I didn't expect. Not because it was flirty exactly. Because it meant she remembered me too. Not just as her son's friend. As me." When we walked back to the room, it was cold enough that she slipped her arm through mine without asking. Just did it naturally, like she'd already decided the distance between us didn't need to be there anymore. I didn't say anything. I just let it happen and tried not to think too hard about how easy it felt. Back in the room, the tiredness finally hit for real. She sat on the bed cross-legged facing me while I took the chair by the window. The lamp was the only light on. Cars passed now and then outside, headlights cutting across the curtains. Jasmine was talking about something her mother used to say when she was younger, but somewhere in the middle of the sentence she drifted off and just looked at me. "What?" I asked. She smiled a little. "You've been careful with me all day." "I'm trying to be decent." "Same thing?" I let out a breath. "Right now, yeah." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "You know, Logan, you don't have to act scared of me." That landed right in the center of me because the truth was I was scared of her. Not in a dramatic way. Just scared of what this was. Scared of being stupid. Scared of wanting something I had no business wanting. "I'm not scared of you," I said. She gave me a look that said she knew better. Then she slid off the bed and came over until she was standing right in front of me. Close enough that I had to tilt my head up a little from the chair. Close enough to smell her shampoo and the diner coffee on her breath. She touched the sleeve of her hoodie and said, "Quiet, then what are you scared of?" I should have answered carefully. Should have stood up and created space. Should have said we were tired and this whole trip had gotten too weird. Instead I stood, and that somehow made it worse, because then we were right there with no room left between us. "I don't know," I said. That was the most honest thing I could have said. She looked at my mouth for half a second, then back at my eyes. "Liar." And then she kissed me. Not wild. Not rushed. Just direct enough that once it happened, there was no pretending it hadn't been building all day. I kissed her back before my brain could catch up. My hand went to her waist. Hers slid up behind my neck. Everything after that felt like stepping off solid ground and deciding too late that maybe I should have stayed where I was. We ended up on the edge of the bed, then against the pillows, still stopping every few seconds like one of us might come to our senses. But neither of us did. She kept looking at me with this mix of sadness and want that made me feel like I was being let into something private. Like I wasn't just there because I was available. Like she had chosen me specifically. That was the mistake I made. Because once that line was crossed, I stopped thinking of the trip as a mess we'd wandered into. I started thinking of it as the start of something. Maybe not neat. Maybe not easy. But real. Later, when the room had gone quiet and she was lying against me with her head on my chest, she traced one finger back and forth like she didn't want to sleep yet. "This doesn't feel like home," she said. I looked down at her. "That a good thing?" "For now," she said. I should have paid more attention to those last two words. But I didn't. All I heard was her staying close to me in the dark, her breathing slowing down, and the sound of cars passing outside while I laid there thinking maybe the road had carried us into some version of life where the usual rules didn't apply. And once I started believing that, I believed everything else with it. The drive back started going wrong before we even reached town. Not with a fight. Not with some big scene. It was smaller than that, which made it worse. Jasmine was quiet. The whole first hour she mostly looked out the window, one knee up, coffee in both hands, like she was already somewhere else. The night before, every silence between us had felt full. Now it just felt closed. I kept telling myself she was tired. That was easy enough to believe. We'd barely slept, we'd been running on gas station coffee and bad food, and the whole trip had been built on no plan at all. Still, I noticed things. She stopped touching me first. Stopped smiling over at me at random. Stopped acting like we were in something together and started acting like she was just getting a ride again. At one stoplight in a little mountain town, I reached over and rested my hand on her leg for half a second, just natural, not thinking. She looked down at it, then up at me, and not mean, not sharp, just flat, she said, "Can you not?" I pulled my hand back like I'd touched a hot stove. "Sorry," I said. She nodded once. "Thanks." That one word sat in the truck a long time. After that I drove and tried not to replay every second of the last 2 days, even though that's exactly what I was doing. The diner. The motel room. Her head on my chest. The way she'd looked at me like I wasn't just convenient. I kept trying to match that version of her to the woman sitting beside me now, and the two versions refused to fit together. By the time we got close to town, the air between us was so different it felt stupid not to say something. "So what happens now?" I asked. She kept looking ahead. "What do you mean?" I almost laughed at that, but there was nothing funny in me. "You know what I mean." She took a breath, slow, like she'd been expecting this and hoping to delay it. "Logan." That was the first bad sign. Just my name like that. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Jasmine, I'm not asking for some crazy promise. I just want to know what this is." She turned to me then, and I could see it on her face before she even spoke. Not confusion. Not guilt exactly. More like she was already backing away in her head. "It was a couple of days," she said. I stared at the road. "That's not all it was." "For you maybe." That hit hard enough that I missed the next turn and had to circle back through a side street. Neither of us said anything while I did it. Then she said, softer, "Logan, listen to me." "No, you listen to me. You don't get to act like I made this up." "I'm not saying you made it up. It sure sounds like that." She looked down at her hands. I was falling apart. I waited. When she looked back at me, her face had gone calm in a way I hated. Calm like she had already decided what this needed to be and was just waiting for me to catch up. "I needed to get away," she said. "I needed to not be home. I needed somebody kind next to me for a minute." That's what happened. I felt my chest go tight. Somebody kind. Don't do that. Do what? Take the ugliest version of what I'm saying. I let out a breath through my nose and shook my head. Then tell me the better version. She was quiet long enough that I knew there wasn't one. We pulled into her neighborhood a few minutes later. Same houses. Same mailboxes. Same quiet street where nothing on the outside showed how fast things could go bad inside a person. The whole drive up her block, I kept thinking maybe she'd change her mind at the last second. Maybe once we stopped, she'd look at me the way she had in that motel room. Maybe all this cold distance was just fear kicking in because we were back. But the second I parked, she unbuckled. No pause. No hesitation. She grabbed her bag from the floor and reached for the door handle. I said, "That's it?" She stopped without opening the door. Didn't turn around yet. Then she said, "It has to be." I looked at her profile. Why? Now she faced me. Because that was the moment. The real ending. Not later. Not after some long silence. Right there in my truck with her bag in one hand and my hoodie still on her back like something borrowed she'd forgotten to return. "Because this doesn't work here," she said. "It doesn't work in town. It doesn't work with Mason. It doesn't work in real life." I swallowed. It felt real to me. Her expression changed a little at that. Not enough to help. Just enough to show she knew. "I know," she said. And somehow that was worse than if she'd denied everything. I said, "Did you know the whole time?" She looked away for a second, then back. I knew it couldn't stay what it was out there. Out there. Like the road had been some sealed little place where actions didn't follow you home. Is she right? Can you really just leave a moment behind like it never happened? Tell me what you think in the comments. Like those nights belonged to the highway, the motel, the dark, and nowhere else. I should have said something angry. Something that would let me leave with some pride. I guess my feelings were stronger than my pride. Subscribe if you're still with me for the end of this. But all I could think about was how stupid I'd been. How quickly I'd built a future out of a woman trying not to break in front of me. She slipped off my hoodie and folded it once before handing it over. That almost finished me. "Please," she said, and now her voice had gone tired again, not soft, just tired. "Forget it." I took the hoodie but didn't move. Then she opened the door and stepped out. No reaching back. No second look. Just walked up the path to her house with her bag hanging from one hand, shoulders straight, like she was already putting those 2 days somewhere I couldn't follow. I sat there and watched her go in. Didn't start the truck. Didn't check my phone. Didn't do anything. And that was when it finally settled in. Out on the road, I thought she was reaching for me. By the time we got home, I understood I'd just been the safest place she could land before she had to stand back up again.